Good morning, Christ Church. For those of you who don't know me, or if I don't know you, my name is Zach Ellis, a member of Christ Church for some time now, and I'm just really grateful and excited to be with you this morning. Before I jump in, I just wanted to share kind of a special bit of context for me. So not quite, but very close to 10 years ago, around this very season, I was in a quite different place in life. 10 years ago, I was resigning from my position as youth pastor of a large church out in the Midwest in Wisconsin. And at that time, I was, let's say, broken. I was defeated, and I had no idea what would come next. I had been struggling with secret addiction, isolation, and shame for a long time, and had reached a breaking point where I couldn't go any further. And that time was a hard one. I left the church, and not too long later, I think about 2 years later, I found myself moving out to New Hampshire to visit family who was anticipating a new baby and thought it was just going to be a couple-week visit. 2 weeks turned into a month. I met many of you within that first window of time, and now here we are, many years later. So this is really a special moment. Today, I get to stand here having experienced an enormous amount of restoration and redemption within your midst, alongside of you, through the relationships, the life spent together over these last now 8 years. I can't believe I've been here 8 years. And so now I get to serve with the Nathan Project. As I've gone through some different titles, now I get to call myself Associate Director, which is very exciting, serving along Rick Cardos and Vicky, and just having graduated from Gordon Conwell, beginning to see clients in my therapeutic work, and God is really, really good. So 10 years later, here we are. So before we jump in, I'd like to take a moment to pray, and then we'll get started. Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to gather together here today, to be a body, to be a family, to live alongside of one another, however imperfectly we do that. You have given us the blessing, the gift that is your church, that we get to live into and to form by our very being. So we thank you for that. We praise you, and I ask specifically for clarity and discernment over what I have to share, the words that you've given me this morning. Ask that you would illuminate your word for us in a way that would inform how we go and live. We pray these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. So, before we jump in to the text, I just want to do a little bit of table setting with you all today. This is like some of my favorite stuff. The stuff that's behind the text, that's above, below the text, all of the context of what's going on here. So, do a little bit of that first. The author of this letter, 1 John, that we're getting into this morning, it's presumed to have been written by John. Writing around 90 AD, John is speaking to a network of house churches scattered around in the region of Ephesus, a little bit around 50 years after Jesus' death. Ephesus was situated on what is today the western coast of modern-day Turkey, a major city center that was facing the Aegean Sea to the west. Under the control of Roman Emperor Domitian, Ephesus was a major administrative and commercial center, blending Greek and Roman culture all together at the same time. It boasted large theaters, libraries, temples, including, I think this is kind of cool, the Temple of Artemis, which was at the time one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So this is where this message is happening. This is what's going on in the landscape into which John is writing. Within this vibrant and multicultural city, the imperial cult was strongly promoted, the Roman authority demanding worship of the emperor as a god in his own right. Life in Ephesus was a kind of balancing act, with citizens attempting to find their place amidst imperial loyalty, pagan traditions, and the early influence of the Christian church. There was a tension to be held as polytheistic practices and monotheistic faith grappled with grappled to share the religious landscape within the city. So you can imagine how daily life for people that would have been living in Ephesus and within these network of churches at that time, they would have been paying attention to the cues associating each other with their particular beliefs, everybody trying to figure out which side they stood on, who could be trusted, who was on which team. The world was changing and shaking. Everyone was looking for firm ground on which to stand. It was while breathing the air of this moment that John took up the pen to write to the early church scattered throughout this region. The young church network was made up mostly of Jewish believers, recently having gone through a pretty significant crisis. So what was the crisis about? A group from within the church network had recently broken off. These people no longer recognizing Jesus as Israel's Messiah or as the Son of God. Not only that, but these people were also attempting to stir up controversy amongst the remaining members, faithful members of the church. These new false teachings threatened to confuse and to divide up the church. Discerning between true and false teachers was increasingly becoming a bigger and bigger problem at the time. As if living amongst these pressures wasn't already enough, between the imperial cult and pagan Greek worship, now the church itself was threatened with former brothers and sisters who were intentionally proclaiming an altered and distorted gospel. Needless to say, this was a bit of a mess, and it was likely to get quite a bit messier. So with this unfolding situation at hand, John sits down to write a series of 3 letters, the first of which seeks to do 2 major things. 1, provide damage control, and 2, offer clarity and assurance to a young and vulnerable church. So in typical John fashion, much like his gospel, the Gospel of John, as well as the book of Revelation, John's writing is highly poetic in nature. His words resonating much more with the heart than with the head. His thoughts are not at all laid out in linear fashion. In fact, John uses what we might call a more cyclical and kind of repetitive approach to exploring the major themes of life, truth, and love. So we might think of it like this, sort of a rough stone that is waiting for its beauty to be revealed. John's words give the readers many facets through which to see and experience a deeper message within it. Think of it kind of like being a sort of kaleidoscope, right? The viewer is able to see a singular object through many different ways all at once. And sometimes that's a little bit dizzying. Don't worry, we can be dizzy together. I certainly was as I read through this passage, trying to sort things through. So we're going to take it one piece at a time. Our passage today comes from 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 21. So if you would open up your Bibles with me, if you have them, your Bible apps, or you can read along together on the screen, we're going to jump into John's shimmering vision of love together. 1 John 4, verses 7 through 21. Sorry, is that ringing a little bit? I'm hearing a little. All right, good. Okay, let's read through this together all the way through. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his Son, his only Son, into the world, so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in him and he in us, because he has given us of his Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. So we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment, because as he is, so also are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him: whoever loves God must also love his brother. You see what I mean by a little bit dizzying and kaleidoscopic here? Love over here, love over here. If you do love, then this kind of love. And if you don't love, then not this. And then it's all over the place. And yet John is writing in this way with a great amount of intention. He's attempting to open this passage up for us to, in a way, kind of give us something to chew on, to make us consider, to lean in a bit more, to consider what is it exactly that he's trying to say from so many different angles. So first things first, the word love comes up a lot in this passage. I think that's pretty obvious, yeah? Tracking with me? Okay. So before we go any further, I think it's quite important to know what kind of love John is talking about here. The word love was understood in a variety of ways within the Greek language of the day, 4 ways to be precise. Each version of love had its own word, with the speaker and reader, which the speaker and reader of this text would have instantly recognized as quite different from the others. You may recognize the 4 different and distinct versions of love. We have eros, romantic and passionate love; philia, friendship and affectionate regard; storge, familial love and natural affection; and agape, creative, life-giving, and other-centered love. Agape stood out as entirely different and distinct from these other versions of love, a new player on the cultural scene which looked unfamiliar, mysterious, and compelling all at once. While the word agape had been around since the world of ancient Greece several centuries prior, it was now experiencing a sort of revival and a kind of transformation in and through the early Christian church. As Jewish biblical texts were being translated into Greek, the Hebrew word ahava, representing a love both divine and human, was now contained within the word agape. As the early church put pen to paper, the language of agape came to be understood as this creative, life-giving, and other-centered love. Every single use of the word love within our passage today is this word agape. Knowing this and reading the passage through this lens provides a different experience for us, for the reader of the time, and for us today entirely. So with this new perspective of agape love, I want us to reread just one verse, that first verse in our passage, verse 7 today, again together. So we'll just read just that verse first. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Now, I'm going to substitute the words love here with a little bit expanded kind of framing here. Beloved, those of you who have received a love freely given that proclaims your unconditional worth and cherished identity, that's all contained right in there with the word beloved. Let us serve each other with the very gift of our lives without concern of repayment. For this radical, wild, irrational way of giving self to others is from God, and whoever risks what they have been given for the benefit and blessing of others in the spirit of adventure has been born of God and knows God. This is a very different way of experiencing that text. That's the meaning and the layers and the nuance that's packed into this language of agape love. That's what was being presented to the early church at this time, where they're reading this and considering what it is to engage in an entirely different way of being in the world. So reading that verse through the lens of agape really paints for us a different picture. John's laying out for his readers a vastly new way of seeing and being in the world, a radical reformation of living alongside of others that would stand in bold opposition to the cultural, political, and religious ways of their day. John ends the verse also with a really interesting statement. We can unpack this a little bit further too. Whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Once again, we need to reach beyond the English translation to unpack a little bit of what's going on here. First, the phrase has been born of comes from the Greek word genao. I'm probably butchering that, but we'll go with it, which means to beget, to give birth, to bring forth, or to produce. So this is the same word which comes from John's gospel in a verse that will be familiar to most of us, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Same word. This is the same word, again, used in our passage today, that whoever loves has been begotten of God, has been brought forth from God, has been produced by God. Put another way, whoever lives in and out of this radical, creative, other-centered, life-giving, focused love is then made up of the very stuff of God. He or she is living as a son or daughter of God himself. To be one who gives agape love to another is equated to being one with God, living within and coming from his character, his personhood, and his lineage. It's a lot packed into a couple of words. John then takes his radical idea even a bit further for us, adding in a new facet through which the reader might experience the agape love of God. John writes that whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Again, we need to turn to the Greek here to get a little more context. The Greek word for know is gnosko, or yes, gnosko. We're going to go with that. To know, to come to know, to recognize, to perceive. This is the kind of knowing that comes through personal experience, a firsthand encounter, an experiential kind of knowing. To paint a more vivid picture, this is the same kind of knowing that's referenced in the Old Testament all the way back in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Now Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore a son. It's also the same word used in the Gospel of Luke, when the Virgin Mary is told that she will bear a son, and she says to the angel at that time, "How will this be, since I do not know a man?" Clearly, John is saying something quite profound here about what this experiential sort of knowing is like. This comes out of agape love. Said another way, whoever agape loves experientially encounters God, becomes deeply acquainted with God, recognizes God, comes into proximity with God, becomes a native in God's world and a member of God's family. This is what it is to know God. Briefly, because it's also fun to jump to yet another language here. Spanish does a really, really good job of this when it talks about to know. There's two different verbs. Saber is to know information. Conocer is to know by experience, by relationship. That's what John's doing right here. He's differentiating. We're talking about a very much relational, connected, experiential kind of knowing. So then John brings his example even into higher resolution, pointing to the living, embodied, incarnate vision of agape love found in Jesus. This is exactly where the idea of agape becomes real. It takes on flesh, if you will. Rather than a lofty concept or kind of an abstracted notion, agape love is most powerfully demonstrated in the real, messy, everyday life. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. His very life, a living example of agape love, giving us a model to follow and to practice. We could spend days talking about what Jesus did, and in fact, John speaks to this beautifully in John 21, verse 15, when he writes, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose not even the whole world would have room for the books that would be written. Well, we don't exactly have time for all of the books that have been written here this morning, although I did ask the ushers if they would lock the doors so I could keep you for an extra few minutes this morning. So we're going to zoom in on just a few ways in which Jesus demonstrates agape love so that we might see how we can live into this radical and transformational way of being. So, from the life of Jesus, we are shown what agape love looks like through embodied, ecstatic experiences of encounter. That's what I want to zoom in on today. We come to know agape love through embodied and ecstatic experiences of encounter. Don't worry, we're going to get into it a little bit more. So we'll start with embodied. To be embodied is to be enfleshed, to be those whose experience occurs within the body and by design. So this might not seem like a necessary thing to say, but trust me for a moment. If we zoom out for a little bit, our world today, we're constantly drawn away from embodied life and experience. Life in the digital world means that we are often, if not constantly, being tempted to use our bodies less. In the same ways, we can easily become more of a head on a stick, disconnected from our own bodily experience. Not only that, but culture has for a long time trained us to engage with life through a very rational lens, to use our brains to discern and decipher what is true, disregarding sensory and intuitive gut-level experience as less than the rational mind. Are you tracking with me here? Does this resonate a little bit? Okay, good. So now the brain is essential, of course, right? But it isn't to be pitted against the body. Rather, it is to operate in necessary relationship with it. We might think of the body as the tuning fork of experience, the place in which we viscerally encounter the realities of life to their fullest, and this is by God's very good design. To illustrate this point a little bit further, we need to enter into the perspective of an ancient person, the very people that Jesus was writing to in our text today. So people living in the ancient world, the ancient Near East, thought of, this is so cool, I love this stuff. They thought of heaven and earth as two domains, necessarily intertwined with man mediating in between them. You can see here we've got this awesome visual. So here we have heaven above, which was thought of as that which informs and covers, and the earth below, that which expresses and supports. We could think about it another way, that heaven is immaterial meaning and earth is meaningless matter. The two necessarily have to come together in order to bring about something entirely new, something alive in which spiritual realities are expressed through physical means. Man sits at the intersection of these two realities, both physical and spiritual, drawing heaven and earth together into embodied life. This is what God chose to do with his infinite creative power, to create a people who might demonstrate his goodness, his truth, and beauty through their bodies. This is the great mystery of what it is to be embodied. We are reminded of this in that God put on flesh to make himself and his ways known to us, that we might live in union with him. God doesn't ask us to just guess at what life could look like, a life of love could look like in him, but instead he gives us love in the language of the body that we recognize, experience, and know. So what does this have to do with agape love before I ramble on and lose you all entirely? Well, it has a lot to do with agape love. It means that we are able to enter into agape love through our awareness of ourselves. By knowing ourselves, knowing our desires, our joys, our longings, our hurts, our aches, our need to be known, cared for, recognized, valued, seen, supported. This is all known in and through the body, the tuning fork of experience. So agape love validates the goodness of the body, of bodily, earthly, created life, while holding tension with the brokenness that we all encounter, bearing each other's burdens as we who sojourn through this life, awaiting the fullness of the new creation to come, new heavens and new earth, new bodies yet to come. So to step into a posture of agape love means to come further into the body, sitting in the ash heap of uncertainty alongside of another by entering into real life as it actually is. Not just in theory or thought, but through the embodied ministry of presence. Next, we've got ecstatic. This is a fun one. I think it's a fun one. Now, on the flip side of embodied life, coming more into our experience, thinking of the body as the tuning fork of experience through which we know ourselves, we have the ecstatic side of the coin. When we hear the word ecstatic, a few different things come to mind, right? Probably something a little bit closer to ecstasy, a kind of overwhelming bliss and joy. So while this is definitely a part of the word's meaning, that's not all of what it means. Ecstatic comes from the Greek ekstasis, which means an out-of-body experience. In our context today, we can think of agape love as a coming out of ourselves, a stepping out of the kingdom of self and into the world of others. Paradoxically, stepping out of ourselves requires first that we already have an awareness of our own bodily experience. In order to occupy an ecstatic posture, an out-of-body experience, we first need to be aware of our own bodies, our own needs, wants, tensions, desires, aches. From this position, from a deep knowing of ourselves, we can then step out of the self and into the experience of the other, assuming their posture through what we know of ourselves. I'll give you an example. I grew up at a Christian camp in northern Wisconsin. That's where I came from, relatively speaking, before I came here. And this place was a place where literally hundreds of people would come every weekend of the year and every week of the summer. Tons and tons of people in and out, in and out. My life was, I grew up surrounded by people, interfacing with people from different backgrounds, stories, and contexts all the time. At times, for me, I would feel overwhelmed with how to engage with so many different people. My dad, at one point, sat me down and gave me some insight that I have never forgotten since. He said something like this: Zach, I know you're feeling like you don't know what to say and feel like you don't know how to connect with others all the time, and it's pretty likely that others are feeling in somewhat the same way. So often we are waiting around, looking for someone who is looking for us. Someone has to go first. If you choose to go first and ask others about their lives, to give others the gift of attention and genuine interest, the whole world will open up to you. Nowadays, I think of it as sort of a secret weapon. You go to a dinner party, you go to a wedding, you go to any sort of event and feel like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I don't know if I have anything interesting to say. I'm going to bore people. This isn't going to go well. The secret weapon is, sure, maybe talk about yourself a little bit, but if you walk in and start asking others about their life, the whole world opens up to you. People love to talk about themselves, in large part because everyone has a story to tell and very few opportunities to tell it are given. This is how ecstatic experience shows up. We recognize that what we ourselves would desire to receive, and then voluntarily offer that experience to others without expectation of return. When we do this, people feel the distinct kind of difference that is held within that experience. This is exactly what Jesus did on the broadest scale possible. Everywhere he went, he was attuning to the needs and experiences of others, entering into the mess, uncertainty, and discomfort of others in order to be with them where they were. Interestingly enough, when we do this kind of stepping out of ourselves, the other aspects of ecstasis, of ecstatic experience, show up too. So often when we do experience a kind of overwhelming joy that comes with this ecstatic encounter, by entering into the life of another, our world grows larger. We come into connection with the muchness of life as God created it to be. Quite literally, we step into the greater whole of union with God and others where there is no separation between us. This is the life that we anticipate in the new creation to come. A life we draw nearer to in our present moment when we step out of ourselves through other-centered agape love. So we've got, so far, embodied and ecstatic experience coming into the body so that we can go out of the body in connection to others. Lastly, we've got encounter. This being with that Jesus demonstrated so vividly brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, encounter. We might think of encounter like when someone says that they had run into a moose while walking their dog, right? This happens around here on occasion. I remember moving out to New Hampshire and being told, you might run into a moose. It was like, I was used to deer and bear in Wisconsin, but not moose. This is like a little over the top. It has yet to happen, but maybe one day. We might use that kind of language to say that we encountered a moose along the trail as we were walking our dog. This is definitely a kind of encounter, but I'd like to flesh this out a little bit further in relationship to encounters with people, not just moose. The word encounter has two definitions that I think really beautifully illustrate what this means. Another facet of agape love. To encounter is to come upon face to face, to engage with or experience in an especially unexpected manner. Put another way, encounter assumes a close proximity to another in a way that is distinctly different from otherwise mundane, shallow experiences. This is most certainly what Jesus did. The New Testament is full of examples of Jesus encountering others, often physically touching another person, definitely in unexpected and surprising ways. After an encounter with Jesus, people were shook up, affected, and impacted. His presence took up residence within people and remained well after he had physically left the premises. Jesus didn't just model this way of being as a sort of brag, right? Leaving us in the dust, knowing that we would never be able to do this in any sort of way. No, Jesus was showing us a way of being that we could live into ourselves, following in his example while empowered by the Holy Spirit, having taken up residence within us. The therapist and author Kurt Thompson offers some really beautiful language to illustrate what this language of encounter can look like. He calls this feeling felt. To feel as though another has entered into your landscape and is present with you in it, sharing in the experience in a way that makes it even more real unto yourself, in a way that reveals not only the reality of your experience, but in a way that conjures up hope, joy, awe, and wonder through the very withness that is encounter. We know this intuitively. We know this at the gut level. When someone is present to us, when someone has entered into our space in the beauty that is encounter, it feels very much different than our regular, everyday, moment-to-moment experience. Years ago, while I was on the road, actually in between my time here, I first came here and then I went on the road to do some photography and documentary work and then came back. And during that time while I was gone, I was pouring myself into this sort of interesting documentary interview style work. For 5 weeks in the summer of 2019, I became obsessed with making a portrait series of this really unique small town in the Catskills of New York, ultimately interviewing over 30 people on camera, not only for the purposes of making a portrait, but on video, having conversation and dialogue with them, often for 2 hours at a time. So a lot of hours built up over a number of weeks. These interviews were immersive, and my desire was really to truly know the person that I was speaking with, being as with and present to them as I possibly could be. Our conversations, as I said, often went on for sometimes 2, even longer, 2 hours each. And by the time I hit stop on the record button, many of the people that I was talking with had cried openly, referencing that they hadn't talked about or even recalled or remembered the things that they had shared for years or even ever. I remember not quite knowing what to do with those experiences at that time. But now I look back and recognize how God was at work through the goodness of embodied, ecstatic encounter. The people I was interviewing were experiencing a radical kind of being with that left them in a position of feeling seen, soothed, safe, and secure. They felt known and valued in the presence of another, attention and genuine caring being given to their life and their story. The amazing thing is, we don't need a camera to do this, and thank goodness for that. It'd be a little weird if everybody was walking around with a camera, all mutually interviewing each other. It'd be like an infinity mirror of cameras. Thankfully, that's not the case. In fact, there are moments of opportunity to give to others the gift of being with that is agape love all the time. One way this happens is when parents step into the lives of their children with the desire that they too feel felt and know that they are known. Not too long ago, one of our own here, Wookie Jones, shared a story with me that really resonated and has continued to influence my thoughts of being present to others. With their son, Isaac, they took time to gather men around a fire, with Isaac anticipating adulthood, with all of the men that were gathered there giving the prompt that they might share a blessing over the life of Isaac, to speak into him, to reflect to him the particulars of who he is in his identity, his character, his goodness, his muchness, for that to be revealed that much more even unto him. This is a picture of agape love, embodied, ecstatic encounter that will surely inform the way that Isaac sees himself, God, and others for the rest of his life. Another one of us at Christ Church demonstrates agape love in her own beautiful way, and I could see her in the back now. Many of you know Vivian. Not too long ago, one day after service, standing just back over there, Vivian came up to me, she grabbed my arm, and she said, "You know, I pray for you every week." I was like, "Oh, cool, that's pretty sweet. I like knowing that Vivian's praying for me." She said, I've been praying for various people who fill different roles in our church, and when the role of artist came up, you came to mind. So I pray for you. I was entirely taken back, more internally than externally. I think I tried to play it cool in the moment. My whole self was feeling seen, soothed, known, valued, and encouraged in that moment. Then Vivian said, just don't get too big ahead about it. You're the only artist here that I know. I appreciate you keeping me humble, Vivian. I could go on and on with examples of how we are able to demonstrate agape love in ways that transform everyday moments into embodied, ecstatic encounters, bringing heaven to earth, bringing heaven and earth together, mediated through the goodness of the body. Perhaps the point is that these moments are available to us all the time if we choose to enter into them. Agape love is not only found in the extreme examples of sacrificial love, like those of the martyrs who gave up their physical lives for the sake of others. While that kind of love is definitely an agape love, without a doubt, we would be missing the point if we thought of agape love as only operating in the extremes. Instead, I think that we might consider agape love as a series of small deaths. A series of small deaths that we voluntarily enter into as parts of us are sacrificed to the highest good, are given up to what is highest. In this way, living out agape love turns us all into a kind of martyr. Those willing to endure many small deaths in order that life abundant might spring up from within us beyond what we could ever create on our own. Much like a seed packed with potential, only when it dies does new life come forth, producing many more seeds. This is how God's created order works. He has demonstrated as much to us through the life, death, and resurrection of his own Son, the ultimate act of agape love which changed the world forever. So agape love, through embodied, ecstatic moments, experiences of encounter, is available to us in all moments of our day, particularly in the mundane, otherwise disregarded moments in which we can choose to enter into that space, to enter into what we might call the profane, where everything looks the same, where everything is mundane. And when we embody this kind of agape love, a sacred space opens up within the profane landscape. Things feel different when we occupy this posture. Now, to sum things up, John leaves us with an interesting number of thoughts about fear and love coming together. Verse 18 and 19 say, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. I think John was attempting to make this point for a very good reason. How often when we consider stepping out into a posture of agape love, do then we immediately begin to ask, but what if? What if I look weird? Do I really have the time to give? Will this really make a difference? Am I just setting myself up to be taken advantage of? Isn't it foolish to just give anyway? Can I really take this risk? The word fear that John uses is the Greek word phobos, as in phobia. Phobos means fear, terror, and alarm. From a neuroscience perspective, this is fascinating. This is the language of the amygdala, the portion of the brain responsible for detecting threats and for triggering what we know as that fight, flight, or freeze response. When we perceive danger, emotional or physical, the amygdala remains active in a way that can and often does lead to a very deep emotional dysregulation that persists over time. However, perfect love might be understood from this passage of this portion of the text as secure attachment, feeling seen, soothed, safe, and secure. Secure attachment comes from embodied, ecstatic encounters with persons who know to our core intend for our good. When we feel this kind of safety, our ventral vagal system, this whole network of nerves that goes from the spinal cord all the way into the body, literally into the gut, that system of our body engages, calming the amygdala, supporting connection and emotional regulation. It quite literally brings us back into ourselves, into a posture of safety, being soothed, safe, and secure. Put in more simple terms, secure relationships, secure attachment, those marked by agape love, activate the parts of our brain and body which decrease fear and regulate our emotional responses. This means that love activates systems of safety, increasing feelings of connection, calm, and trust. So when John wrote that perfect love drives out fear, he was saying to his readers and us today that when we encounter embodied and others-focused relational safety and unconditional care, agape love, our physical bodies are literally reshaped and reformed to experience what it is to have secure attachment with God, self, and others. In a world where we are given constant reason to fear, and I think we can all understand that to some degree in our modern landscape, to feel insecure, to wonder if we belong, if we are cared for, if we are worthy, agape love shows up on the scene as undeniably different. A soothing balm that restores faith and hope in God's goodness, literally banishing fear. This is what creative, life-giving, others-centered agape love does. To wrap things up, although John was writing to people living roughly 2,000 years ago, his words ring just as true for us today. The young network of churches in the region of Ephesus were facing a world filled with uncertainty, many different worldviews colliding with each other together all at once. False teachers popping up, threatening to confuse the simple message left by Jesus. This is our world today. The challenges we face, the very same as the churches scattered throughout Ephesus to which John sought to encourage nearly 2,000 years ago. Let this be an encouragement to us, that we walk the same paths as those who have come before us, as we come into an opportunity at hand to be those who subvert the expected order of things by our undeniable agape love. This happens in the micro, not the macro. It happens within the local ways that impact the global. Embodied in ecstatic encounter is life manifested where we are in our neighborhood at the intersection on the map, such that when we show up as a people present to the life around us, the whole map is covered. If we attend to where we are and everyone else the same, the whole map is covered. Taking up this posture of agape love, following in the way of Jesus, everything changes. The sacred breaks into the profane landscape. The veil is lifted, revealing life abundant even more clearly. Heaven and earth are drawn nearer together. This is what agape love does. And we are those called to offer it to others, equipped to do so through the Spirit, which already lives within us as we follow the path Jesus has laid out before us. Embodied, ecstatic experiences of encounter. May it be so. Let me pray.